All right, 2023, I'm going to show how I clean a revolver. I get the date a lot of times when people talk to me about revolvers. It's 2023. You still using those things? But I'm going to show what I do here, and I just want to make a mention that there really is no necessarily wrong way to clean a revolver. There's many right ways. There might be some certain wrong things you can do that you definitely don't want to do ever in any situation, but there's not really a wrong way to clean a revolver as long as you're doing it kind of with proper methods. So I want to show what I do with my Smith & Wesson 686 here, and it's very rare that I do a video, my ballistic test videos, where I'm not cleaning my revolvers the night before. So let me show you how I clean my revolvers. And like I was mentioning, there's not really a wrong way, but there are definitely wrong things you can do to damage a revolver. But you know, there's different methods. In my particular method, I like to take, you know, this thing down as much as possible. I like to take the cylinder off and the grip off. I mean, you could clean it just fine without taking the grip off or taking the cylinder off, but I like to because I get better access to the cylinder face when I take it off the revolver. Plus, I don't like all the oils and stuff getting all over my rubber grips since I use rubber. If I used wood, I probably wouldn't like that either. So all I'm going to need here is a screwdriver. We're going to need some patches. Need some brushes. I got nylon, I got copper wire, I got steel. You're going to need a bore brush, and you're going to need one of these little deals here to hook your patches on here, or a jag to push that through. So let's get started here. Alright, so you want to use really proper size screwdrivers here. So this is a Hogue grip I'm taking off here. I don't know the model number of that grip, but it goes on, you know, a mono grip style where it's on the bottom here. So I like to get that out of the way, like I said, so I don't have to deal with getting oil and all kinds of stuff on there. So this just simply slips off on this particular revolver. This part doesn't come off, which is really nice. Now, anytime we work with screws on a revolver, we want to use absolutely proper screws, and we want to use ones that are machined correctly. I forget what they're called. I think it's called a hollow ground, where it, you know, it's not just a blade end, but it's also kind of wide at the end. So those are the type of screwdriver tips you want to use. So I like to take my cylinder off, and this is going to be different from revolver to revolver, but on my Smith & Wesson here, I just push down real hard so it doesn't slip off, and I just turn it counterclockwise. And these have a thread locker on them that's dried on the screw, so you never have to really excessively turn these things to tighten them. So you want to pull this out, and almost every revolver has a spring-loaded pin on the end of that screw there that comes apart this way, that holds the crane in place. So you want to be careful not to lose that little pin right there if you're taking that out. So I like to just take the cylinder off, and on the Smith & Wesson we can take it apart even more like this. So what I typically use, I use either break-free CLP or I use Ballistol, whatever is available at the time. I couldn't find any Ballistol for like the past year, so I've been using CLP. I always like to have one of these little containers like this so I can put parts in it. So what I like to do is I like to fill each chamber with a little of the CLP, let it soak through, and then go on the top here on the cylinder face. And I'll just kind of set it in there. I'll set that to the side for a little bit, and I like to do the same thing here with this little crane piece. I like to spray that down, throw it over there so we don't get anything on anything. I like to use paper towels too, because it's, you know, it's easier for me because the oil just drips into this, and I can just throw that away along with these. Another thing I like to have is some just basic cloth rags. This one's got a little bit of residue oil over it. I like ones like that, and then one that's like completely dry. I like to use both of those. So now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put some CLP down the bore until I see it start coming out the right here, out the other end of that barrel there on the forcing cone. And once that starts coming through, I like to also then spray the frame right here and on the forcing cone itself. And that's pretty simple like that. And sometimes I can let that set for a few minutes, but really this is not very dirty today, so I really don't have to. So basically from there, I just start bore brushing it. So I'm going to get a proper 357/38 caliber copper bore brush. And this is the part here where you can do things wrong. If you just sit there and you slam that through there, you can knock the the muzzle crown and cause damage to that. You don't want to do that. So at the point this part goes past the muzzle, you just want to be careful. And once you're fully in, then you don't have to be as careful, and you just pull it all the way through, push it all the way through, pull all the way out, and just careful each time that rod goes in the muzzle. You want to make sure it's like perfectly lined up here. So, you know, once I get to that point, then I push through real slow to make sure that end doesn't hit that. Then when I pull it out, it's not a big deal. But you know, right here I slow it down, and I'm real slow, make sure it goes through. So I can do that a whole bunch of times. And I can add more CLP and keep doing that. You know, the more the better sometimes. Then I like to take my cylinder and I go in from the back here instead of the front, because, you know, the back half of the cylinder here, all the way up into the cylinder throat, is going to be 0.380, 0.379380. And then right about here, you hit the cylinder throat, and then it goes down to 357. So when you go in from the front, basically it's a tight fit, and you have to go all the way through and then completely remove the brush, because if you don't remove it and you just shove it back in while it's in there, it can break these bristles. But when you do it from this side here, yeah, I can pull it back out of here as much as I want because it's 380. So when I go up here and I go through the cylinder throat, I pull it back through, I don't have to fully remove it. I can just go like that, which makes it easier than having to pull it out and reline it up, pull it out, reline it up that you'd have to do in the front. So I like to just do that. I do a whole bunch of scrubs like that, each chamber. I'm just going to do it fast for video purposes, but this will still, even this fast cleaning will do a good job. The 4th chamber out of 6, 5th one out of 6, 6th one out of 6. Now here's the reason why I like to have this off completely, because I can put it flat like this. I can put a little bit more on here like this, and then scrub it. Now for me, I like to use steel and copper. Now this is a blued revolver. This would be a completely different thing. I would be using nylon to go pretty soft on it, and then I would use copper, but I wouldn't push real hard. On this, on the other hand, what I like to do is start out with the copper, because it's more fine. I like to push real hard. You know, you can see some dirt on there at the beginning here. I like to push real hard, and that really likes to, you know, get in all those little crevices in between where that stuff's sitting. And then I like to alternate back to the steel. And I don't worry so much about steel, especially when you don't push very hard. And I just like to go like this all the way around it and alternate back and forth, because the steel will get the hard stuff on the surface that this won't take off very easy, and this will go more fine area to where you can't, where the steel isn't going to fit into those little crevices. And you'd see it on a microscope. You know what I mean if you saw it on a microscope. So once I get down to that, I like to take my cloth that's already kind of oily, and we just wipe it down here. And you can see in almost no time that thing is almost completely clean. That's pretty much clean enough for me. I'll go over it one more time here. It's totally sparkling. I like to pull out this crane piece here. I like to do the same thing. Yeah, you get a lot of burnt stuff on that back piece there. Now if your revolver is super shiny and you use like steel on it like this, you gotta kind of be careful, because it will leave marks. But if you're dealing with a brushed finish, it's not really a big problem, and you can always fix those brush marks if they're in the wrong direction by taking steel, pushing it really hard on the surface, and it takes care of that, no problem. I'm mainly just taking off this crud right here on this edge here where it's burnt. Just go all around that like that. And I set that aside. Now I start working here on the foresting cone. That's pretty simple here. And you can see, maybe you can see it or maybe you can't, but there's a lot of burnt stuff up on here, and it's back behind there. So I simply hold it like this and just take the copper, and I start brushing here. I'm always careful on this back side here, because I don't want like to break off a copper wire and it to go in the action back here. by the hand, so I'm always careful back there. I'm not really scrubbing real hard. I always like to put it downward like this so that if any of these bristles break off, they're not going to go in that. So I'm going on this forcing cone here really hard. I'm not worrying about scratching it because it's a stainless and you can always fix that. And I like to alternate back to the steel. The steel gets in that little crevice a little bit better because it's a harder bristle. And just by alternating that, it doesn't take much. Take my oily rag here. I like to take these edges of these rags here that are built really well and push it in between the forcing cone and the frame right there. That gets a lot of crud out. But, you know, there's still some stuff in there on the bottom of that. I like to fully get that out. I like to use some of the excess here that I have in this little tray here. Pull it up. Let it drip down on that. That's why I don't dry my bores out until I'm done with this, because I'm getting this stuff all over the place and it's getting more back into the bore, all of that. So it's an oily mess, but it's good. Does a good job with that oily mess. And a lot of times some of the stuff won't come off unless you actually wipe it with the rag. It's like it'll just stay there until it has somewhere to go. So you use the oily rag and that'll take that off there. I'm just doing steel on here until I get that burnt mark off. Go back to some copper here. Takes a little bit of elbow grease, I won't lie. But for the most part, that's clean on that bottom there. And it's pretty clean on the top. Yeah, I get some flame cutting, but it's pretty darn clean here. Now, before I start working on, you know, cleaning the bore in the chambers fully, I like to take a look at this, push this back here, and look for any crud back here. Generally, that doesn't take a whole lot of cleaning. Back here, I like to use the nylon because these are such high little crevices that the nylon really gets in there and you know, cleans out that ratchet area really well like that with the nylon. There's nothing that's ever burnt on there. And just dry it like that. Push it back down, get all underneath here. Make sure there's no powder or anything like that. Now at this point, it's pretty simple. I take my rags here. Depending on how I feel, I'll put more stuff on here on these. Sometimes I won't because the bore will be so saturated already. And I just switch over to my little jag type thing here. And then I'm gonna put on here. This one's actually meant for a 22 and up, so it works for everything. And I just come in through the muzzle here. I don't pull it all the way through like that usually. I like to pull it out like this and then go halfway and then pull it back like that, and then you get a much tighter fit, and that way you know you're actually going into the rifling, not just on the surface of that bore. I just go back and forth a whole bunch of times. And while I'm at it, I'll sit here and I'll just go like this through the chambers as well. I'll just use the same one for a little bit here until it's fully dirty. Real simple there. Now I can do this process with these rags here. I can do a dozen of them sometimes, just depending on how clean I care about it being. But usually a few of them is enough to really see a big difference. And just like before, I want to be pretty careful about that muzzle and not slamming the rod into that muzzle up there. But you can see here, there's not much left on there. There's usually a little bit more in the chambers than what there ever is in the barrel. A little bit more burnt stuff. It's not too bad today. I probably only put 20 rounds through this since I cleaned it last, so it's not particularly dirty. Alright, so I'm going to dry out the chambers and the barrel here, but not before I do my final put together of the revolver, because sometimes the oil can get around on things. It can shift around and get back down on the bore. So I like to, wait on that process. Sometimes I'll take Q-tips and I'll put them in these holes in here just to make sure everything's clean, but there's not really any need for that right now. But basically what I like to do here, I like to take this part here, this crane, I'll put a little drop of that CLP in, just wipe it off like that, because that's going to interact with, in there where it turns, and it's going to turn nice and smooth. You see, and I'll do that same process. I'll put like one little drop right there, dab on that. I'll put this back together. What we're going to do is put that cylinder in place like that first, and then pull this crane out here, and then slide it in. It's easier to do it that way than some of the other processes where you're trying to cram it all in there. So now what I'm going to do here is I want to put the screw back in place. It has the thread locker on it. Got that pin coming up through there that you can see. So I'm going to put that in place. And this is where you want to be real careful. Make sure you have that proper fitting screwdriver. Now this, you don't want to super tighten it. You just want to tighten it till it stops, and then I'll do like just an eighth of an inch. Not an eighth of an inch. An eighth of a turn, not even that. Just a turn. I'm not torquing it at all. I'm just making sure it's tight. And while I'm here, I'm going to make sure that these screws here on the side plate are fine. I'm going to flip it all around, make sure the screw on the cylinder release is fine. That seems fine. Now, a little bit of oil here on the back here. I'm going to wipe this off before I put the grip on it. I'm going to slide my grip right back on place here. I'm going to put the screw in place. I'll get a little bit of oil on the grip while I'm doing this. And I lost the screw to this somehow. I don't think I've ever done this where I haven't misplaced at least one screw during the process. I'll find out at some point. It's good enough for showing what I'm going to do now. All right, so now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take a dry cloth here, and I might as well even remove this because I'm done with all the oil now. I'm going to dry off the grip. I'm going to dry off the frame all over it. A little bit harder to do. My grip is slipping off. And where is that screw? I don't see it. In fact, give me a second here. I'm going to look for that screw. Okay, it was under my patches. Something like that always happens. On this grip, I don't worry so much about a perfect fitting screwdriver just because, it's a big old replaceable screw. It's not really a firearm part. Just tighten it on real tight. Don't worry about it. All right, so now we got that back together. So I'm going to wipe this thing down, get all the excess oil off here. Try to use as dry of cloth as possible to get this excess off. And then I'm going to wipe down the frame here. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to wipe down the cylinder face. I'm going to wipe down up here inside of the frame here, up above the forcing cone. I'm going to bend this cloth and put it right here and clean that out like that. Just everything dry. I'm going to push this rod back. I'm going to dry in there. Make sure everything's dry, everything's good. I'll test it. Everything seems fine, nothing's loose. Now at this point, now we got all that excess off. Now I can worry about drying out the bore and the chambers. So we'll get a nice dry bore and chambers here. After all that's done, it's pretty clean. And from here I'll go from the front at this point because it ain't gonna matter. I'm just putting a dry cloth in there. And I could put a few more through there, but essentially that's pretty clean cloth here. So here we are, completely clean Revolver. Absolutely smooth, perfect. Good time to check timing, make sure that it clicks in place before the hammer drops. Everything seems smooth and fine. Also, when this grip is off, you can check the strain screw, which I haven't checked it, but I know it's fine. I'll dry this grip off a little more. The only difference here if I was cleaning a blued Revolver is that you would not see a lot of the crud, so you want to be more careful so you don't remove the bluing or whatever coating on there. So instead of using the steel, I would never use the steel. I would use the copper wire, but I would use it much more gently, and I would be using the nylon brush more than any others on clean all those parts. So that's what you'd get. And that's what you get. That's what I do. I do this process, before every one of my ballistic test videos. I'm doing this. because I don't want to be out on the range and have, you know, poor velocity because it wasn't cleaned right, or have, you know, the cylinder not rotate because there's crud back there. I want it nice and smooth, and cleaning it before every use when I do my videos is a good way to keep that reliability up. So just thought I'd show that. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.